Hello geographers, it's time to talk about the important concepts which are known by the acronym SPICESS. Okay folks, today's learning goals, I want you to write these down in your exercise book. You're going to know some important geography concepts which we've already touched on and you're going to be able to use those concepts to analyze a location, and that location is your house. Okay, let's do some notes. So we're going to have one slide for each concept word, and remember you only need to write down the stuff that's in white. So when there's a little bit of orange text at the end here giving you a little example, you don't need to write that down unless you want to. Okay, the first concept is space. Space is a location on the surface of the earth. It's the effects of where something is and how it's distributed, yeah? Okay, so distribution means spread around. So geography is all about the importance of where stuff is. So space is a really, really important concept, yeah? So, and there's two different ways to think about space or location, and that is absolute location, e.g., blah, blah, latitude, blah, blah, longitude, or relative location, so where something is in relation to something else. So absolute location for a school could be, it's 15 degrees south, 13 degrees west. That's a latitude or longitude GPS coordinate that you can put into Google Maps. Or it could be relative location. It's 10 kilometers north of the CBD. It's 5 kilometers west of John's house. Whatever. Remember this? No, you probably don't because you're too young. This is the Melways. So before Google Maps, everybody used to use Melways maps, and so you'd be driving around and you have to get out this humongous giant book of maps to find out where stuff is, and this has absolute locations on it, so it has grid references, blah 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 blah. We used to teach students about grid references, but now that Google Maps exists, ain't no point. So here's an example of Google Maps. This is live. This is Boston in the US, and this is a live traffic video. Well, obviously it's not live, but it's a screenshot of live. So green is not much traffic. So just think about how much more amazing mapping technology is compared to when we used a static paper book. Our second concept is place. Now students often get confused between space and place, but you don't need to, because I'm going to tell you how they're different. Space is just the description of the where it is and nothing else. It just tells you where the point on the earth is, that space is. The place is the meaning that we put on a space. So for example, a school might be using relative location 10 kilometers north of the CBD, but in terms of it as a place, it's a school, it's a learning community, it's a workplace, it's an animal habitat, yeah? So the space is just where it is. The place is what meaning us humans give to that space. Here's a lovely picture of a school of the future. So that would be a place. Yippee. Okay, our third one. Now, obviously, you might be needing to pause this to take down all the notes, and that is the entire point of why we're doing it as a video. The third one is interconnection. It's a big fancy word which basically just means how things are connected. Okay, it's how people and things are connected. So for example, at our school is an example of interconnection. There's a lot of interconnection at our school because it connects young people as friends, connects educators to students, connects teachers to each other, connects people to green spaces, connects agriculture students to farm animals. It connects students to their seats, whatever. Interconnection is a really, really broad concept because you can find a connection between two things any way you like it. Here's a funky graphic just showing an example of interconnection around the world. The world that we live in is really, the economy is what we would call globalized. So it really, really depends on each other. Most of what Australia produces goes overseas, and heaps of the stuff that we consume comes from overseas. And so when a global pandemic kicks in and a lot of those borders go, then you've got problems. The space-place interconnection change. The fourth concept is change, and that's simply when we introduce the concept of time into geography. So it's using time to better understand things. It's how places and spaces change. How places change, how spaces change, how interconnection changes over time. Change is all about time. So for example, over time, family sizes have decreased. Over time, Aiken College went from a natural landscape to a farmland to a school. Yeah, time. Here's an interesting little use of change as a concept. So this is showing a forest. So along the horizontal axis here, that's time. And this is showing that first up, you have just your forest, and then it gets cut down, and then it's completely deforested, and then it gets reforested, and then hey, look, forest is coming back. That's change as a concept in geography. Our next one is environment. The environment is the natural and urban environments that we live in. So the environment doesn't just mean the green stuff, it also means the built environment. Yeah, so environment is everything. So a city can be environment, it's a built environment. The environments provide us with four things: source, sink, spiritual, and service function. And there's a little description about what those four things are. Source, it's the source of heaps of stuff. That's where we get our soil, our water, our forests, our minerals, our marine life, whatever. It's a sink, which means stuff gets sunk into it, not like, yeah, so it like absorbs waste. It absorbs human pollution and animal pollution, so like that all gets filtered through soil and filtered out into the water system, blah, blah, blah. It provides us with all kinds of services, such as the climate, biodiversity, radiation, heat, all that good stuff, and spiritual functions. So what we mean by that is like human enjoyment out of it. So we get recreational benefit from the environment, psychological benefit, aesthetic benefit, ooh, that's a nice forest, and spiritual benefit as well. So let's look at this one, for example. This is Central Park in New York in the USA, and this is a really interesting example of a natural environment and a built environment. Well, you could technically say that the park is a built environment because the park, that exact collection of trees wasn't there. They've all been planted by humans. So you can say the entire area is a built environment. There you've got a man-made lake, and then you've got all kinds of shrubs and trees, and with a massive amount of skyscrapers all around it. Awesome place, Central Park. I highly recommend you go there. The next one is scale, and that is how you're thinking about a geography issue changes based on whether you're looking at it close up or far away. So it's thinking at different perspectives, and the different scales you can think of, like the individual, the community, the suburb, the region, the state, national, international. Yeah, how you think about something makes quite a big difference depending on the scale that you think about it in. For example, let's take population increase and look at the different scales, right? So population increase, the amount of people increasing. So from the individual scale, we might have a family of 4, we might welcome in a new sibling, and then we've got a family of 5. Yeah, that's population increase at the individual level. At the community level, perhaps we live in a high growth suburb like Greenville, and heaps more people are moving into that suburb. That's population increase at the community level. At the suburb level, we might see so many people moving into that suburb that more facilities are being built, bigger roads, we wish, playgrounds, stuff like that. At the regional level, what you find is that most migrants who come to Australia from other countries move to the cities, not the regions, not rural areas. At the state level, different states in Australia have different population growth rates. Some are growing quicker than others. Melbourne is the fastest growing area in Australia, and it's set to overtake Sydney as the biggest city in Australia in about the next 20 years or so. But that might all change because we are going through some big changes right now. Okay, at the national level, Australia's population, if it wasn't for migration from other countries, Australia's population would be going down. We don't have enough babies to keep our population steady, let alone increase it. So we bring in hundreds of thousands, about 250,000 migrants a year. And at the international level, the world population is growing, yes, but its growth rate is slowing. If you can remember back to one of our earlier videos where we talked about the demographic transition model, what you'll find is that most countries' fertility rate is dropping, and so even though human population is looking like this at the moment, it's at a point where it's going to get to about there, and most estimates say it's going to top off at about 9 or 10 billion and then start going down again. That's going to be an interesting time to be alive. This is really cool. Here's different ways of some different scales there in comic strip form. Lovely. Sustainability. Right. Sustainability means maintaining the capacity to keep doing something into the future. And you might have heard me rabbit on before to say that sustainability is usually used to talk about environmental sustainability, doing things to make sure that the environment can continue to support life. But sustainability can also be used in other areas. Financial sustainability. Am I spending more than I'm earning? That would be unsustainable. Social sustainability. Am I losing friends more than I'm gaining them? Yeah, so it's usually meant about the environment, but it doesn't need to be. So, for example, some kinds of things that are sustainable, environmentally sustainable, include recycling, reusing, re-nourishing soil, cleaning up the ocean. And some things that aren't sustainable include burning fossil fuels because they can't be renewed. It takes millions of years to produce coal. Cutting down old growth forests or polluting rivers. Now, old growth forests, what I mean is forests that have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. There's other things which we could call tree farms where they plant trees, cut them down for wood and then replant them. That is sustainable because you're planting the trees again. But if you're just cutting down old growth forests and just letting it turn into farmland or whatever, that's unsustainable. Eventually you're going to run out of them. If any of you guys know about Easter Island, that island in the middle of the Pacific with the giant heads, that society died out because they destroyed their environment. True story. And it might happen to us, which would suck. So here's some different types of environmental sustainability. We've got things that are sustainable, moving to renewable resources, protecting ecosystems, avoiding pollution where possible, yada yada yada. Okay, your activity today, I want you to do a SPICESS analysis. So I want you to write space, place, interconnection, change, environment, scale, sustainability, and leave some gaps. And I want you to write a short sentence for each about how you could think about your house. Or it doesn't have to be your house. If you want to do it on the MCG or the Opera House or whatever, do it on that. But something like that, yeah? You're going to write the word and then you're going to write a brief description about how that concept applies to your house. So I've done a few there as an example, but you're going to do your own. Right. Short video here. It's SPICESS Geography Skills. Take it away.
Welcome to another video on geography skills. Today we're going to look at another acronym in order to remember the 7 key geographic concepts. That is SPICESS, or SPICESS, or SPICESS. Actually, it doesn't matter as long as you remember it. These concepts are space, place, interconnection, change, environment, scale, and sustainability. That may seem like a lot to take in, so let's just take one term at a time and go through them. Firstly, space. When we're thinking about space, we're thinking about the spatial distribution of an area. Is that area significant? How is that area organised or managed? A helpful example here might be the BBC programme Grand Designs with Kevin MacLeod. Kevin loves to go on about how buildings use light and what kind of a space they've created. This can be both absolute, such as the library is a space, or relative. I might have a certain couch at home where I turn on the light of an evening and that's my relaxing reading space. A lot of the time when we're thinking through space, we first need to get a handle of what is the purpose of that space. Which brings us to place. Many students get these two terms confused. I like to say that place is much more conceptual. It's what you think about an area. Because of this, places can give meaning and can help you to identify with something. They can be both very local or global. They can also mean different things to different people. An attic, for example, might be a cozy, adventurous place, or a scary place depending on who's looking at it. At the end of the day, it's what you think about a place that defines it. So places can have importance for some people, they can provide others with a sense of identity, or a sense of belonging where they feel they connect with others. Which brings us to interconnection. They say that nothing happens in a vacuum. Which is right if you think about it. If something happened, it wouldn't be a vacuum. But this phrase basically means nothing happens in isolation, but everything is connected in some way or another. So when thinking through this geographic term, we want to ask questions like, what ways are places connected to each other? How significant are those connections? How did those connections occur? And why are they important? Getting a handle of that is crucial when we look at the next geographic concept, which is change. Change is a way of explaining geographic phenomena and processes. These can be both natural, such as a river causing a canyon, or human-induced, such as climate change. They can be both predictable and unpredictable, can occur gradually, such as natural erosion, or quickly, such as an earthquake. While longer, predictable processes are easy to discuss, sometimes change can occur in a completely random fashion. And change can have significantly different impacts based on when it occurs, how it occurs, and where it occurs. Environment. When discussing the environment, we're largely talking about how humans relate to our environment. This question is often referred to as interrelating. The environment supports us by giving us food, raw materials. It recycles many of our waste products, such as carbon dioxide, and provides habitats for animals who live in complex ecosystems. The environment is a product of a whole range of different processes, from geomorphic to biotic, geological, and human-induced. Humans relate with the environment in very different ways. It depends on how you perceive it, which leads to people adapting to it in different ways, and using it in different ways. These different perceptions of the environment depend on cultural differences. They could also be based on the level of technology we possess, population density, the type of economy a country might have, and their values and worldview. Scale. The concept of scale is examining geographic phenomena from a number of different spatial levels. These can be personal, local, regional, national, international, or global. Let's use drought as an example. From a personal level, we might look at a farmer who's struggling to feed his cows. At a local level, all of the farmers might have to travel far and wide trying to provide as much grass as possible for their herds. At a regional level, they might organise for trucks to bring in feed, hay from other areas to feed their cows when the grass runs out. At a national level, perhaps this might have an impact on live exports. Perhaps we will have a bit of a trade deficit as a country based on our inability to provide enough cattle. At an international level, we might look at the overuse of beef as a foodstuff, which has created imbalance in different ecosystems. From a global point of view, climate change might cause a greater infertility of soil, and we may need to think through how efficient our food production processes are. Which leads us to sustainability. Sustainability is us living in such a way that we can guarantee the environment is still there for future generations. This can range from governments giving funds for renewable energy startups, to the home where we work on recycling as many materials as possible. An example of this can be found on Grand Designs, where people have developed a type of home called an earthship. This is a home where they try to recycle everything needed to build the property and make the property as sustainable as possible. So that's SPICESS. Any questions? Comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
And another short video, geography concepts. Check it out.
Okay, so this is just a little video lesson, if you like, just introducing the 7 concepts in geography. Some of them you're probably already familiar with, but for the purpose of our subject this year, this semester, we're going to just have a little refresher on these 7 concepts. I'm hoping at the end of the semester that you'll know these off by heart. Shouldn't take too long, there's only 7. And so the concepts as we know them are listed right here. As you can see, place, space, environment, interconnection, sustainability, scale, and change. These are the 7 concepts. Some of them we might look at together depending on the task that we're doing. Others we might pay a little bit more of a particular focus on depending on where we want to go with them. So the first concept I want to talk to you about today is place. Now when we think about place, we really are thinking about those areas or locations on the surface of the earth that actually provide meaning to people. Right? It could be a country, it could be a city, it could be a school, it could be a hospital, it could be a bedroom. Right? So no matter what place we are talking about, we have to have a look at the meaning it has to people. The second concept I want to talk about is space. Now, when we think about space, when people think about it, often they might think, oh well, space, isn't that like the wide universe when we're talking about space? Yes, to some people, I think maybe that's how they picture it, and fair enough. But for geography and for geographers, we like to look at it in a little bit more of a different way. We look at how things are arranged and organised on the surface of the earth. So when we talk about space, that's what we're talking about, and it has 3 main elements: location, spatial distribution, and organisation. So location, where things are situated or located on the earth. Spatial distribution, how are they arranged? Is there a pattern to it? And organisation goes one step further by looking at how and why things might be arranged or situated or located the way they are. Now the third concept I want to talk about is environment. Now there are lots of environments that exist on the planet, but we could probably put all of the environments into 2 broad categories: natural and human. Now when we talk about the natural environments, we're talking about things like deserts, like mountains, seas, rivers, all those sorts of our environments that have been largely untouched by human activity. Now a lot of environments on the earth have been so affected by human activity that very few of their natural features remain. We refer to these environments as the human environments or the built environments, and these include things like cities, towns, suburbs, agricultural regions, and you find that in these regions soil, plants, animal life have all been affected. But not only that, a lot of these environments can also affect the climate. Have a look at New York as an example. Now New York, being one of the biggest cities in the world, has its own microclimate. It'll often probably be a few degrees hotter than the surrounding areas because of the concrete in the buildings, and they do a lot to trap the sun's heat. So you'll find that in a lot of those built up regions around the world that there are some significant effects that take place, not just on those physical aspects on the earth, such as the soil, plants and animals, but also in the atmosphere. And that's an important thing to remember when we talk about environment, and we look at that as a concept. And no thing on earth exists in isolation. And that brings me to my next concept, which is interconnection. Now, when we talk about interconnection, it seems pretty straightforward. We are really looking at how things on the planet actually start connecting to each other. Now, geographers use the concept of interconnection to better understand those links between the natural and the human processes that shape our Earth. We've already talked about the natural and human environments, and so this is a really good place to look at and think about this whole concept of interconnection. What is it that affects the natural environment that might be as a result of human activity? What is it that affects the human environments as a result of natural processes that occur? So you can see that already we're looking at a couple of concepts that do relate quite closely to each other. And most of these concepts do, but this is a prime example. Now the next concept is one that gets a bit of attention, and that's the concept of sustainability. Now this is a word that has become very popular in recent times, but I often ask myself, do I understand what it actually means? This whole notion of sustainability. I used to think of it in terms of, the ability that we have as humans to sustain our own lives. But I've probably grown in my understanding of that definition by understanding for myself that it's not just about the capacity that we have to sustain human life, but the capacity that we have as humans to sustain all life. And I think that's an important thing to get our heads around. We can look at things like energy sources as an example. The renewable energy sources like wind and water that are used in many places around the world to provide energy for people. Or we can look at it in terms of the non-renewable resources, those that we are chipping away and never replacing because we can't. Once we use them, they're gone. And so the sustainable practices really are looking at those practices that are going to give, as I mentioned before, not just sustenance for human life, but a sustenance for all life around the planet. One of the things geographers like to do is undertake inquiries, and a key part of undertaking any inquiry is to understand the scale at which you're undertaking it. So for example, you might want to study something on a very small scale, but in another situation you might want to study it on a very large scale. So to give you some examples of the different scales that geographers might like to undertake an inquiry, if they were taking a study on a local scale, it might be how many people attend a certain skate park in Hobart. If they were looking at a regional level study, they might think, okay, how many tourist numbers did Tasmania receive in last year? Okay. On a national level, it could be something like having an inquiry into how many tourists are visiting all the national parks across the country. On an international level, it could be looking at things like poaching in certain African nations, and because many of these nations might be together and have the same issue, that covers goes across international borders. And finally, you might have something or study something on a global level. For example, like an inquiry into not just national parks in one country, but national parks around the whole world, and having a look at some of the issues and key issues that affect all of those national parks. So that's just an example of why scale as a concept is important to geographers and how they might be able to use it. Now the concept of change is a very important one in geography. It helps us understand a little bit more about the processes that go on in the earth and help us to see it as a dynamic place. And that's important, that we understand that it is always changing. Over millions of years, the earth has been shaped by a lot of natural forces. We can look at things like earthquakes and volcanoes, storms, massive climate changes, and we get an understanding of those natural forces. But that's not to discount, obviously, a lot of the changes that have taken place as a result of human activities, and the things that humans do to affect some of those aspects of the natural world, such as climate, as we've already mentioned in another concept. But it serves as a stark reminder when you see things like tsunamis and earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and how they can actually impact severely on many human populations around the world. And so it's important to track those changes and understand why they're important and how best we can deal with them in the future. So that's just a very brief overview of the 7 concepts. I do hope that you come to learn them very quickly. There's only 7. and I have found in the past that many students have learned them very quickly because there are only a few. So make sure that you go through this video, understand a little bit more as what I was telling you about, look at the examples, and just keep in mind that the study of geography is really the study of the world around us. And if we can come to understand how these concepts fit in to that study, then it's going to be to our benefit.
Now, I've got some good news for you. We're not going to be doing homework in these videos. You're just going to have the learning goals to write down, the notes to write down, do the activity, watch the videos, do the reflection activity. No homework. You're welcome. Okay, but there is a reflection activity. Really quickly, I want you to take those 6 concepts: space, place, interconnection, change, environment, scale, sustainability, and I want you to rank them in order from first to last in terms of what you think is most important to least important when thinking about geography issues. So you just need to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and then put the words in the order that you think is most important to least important when you're thinking about geography issues. Thank you so much for taking part in today's lesson. I really appreciate it. We all do. And do not ever forget to keep it real.